A number of interviews to get to. And speaking of interviews, let's go to Robert McNeely, who interviewed David Schroeder with Monetary Gold. Take a look.
Welcome back to the RSBN Live Desk. It is David Schroeder from Monetary Gold. I just learned that gold skyrocketed 777% over the last 20 years. What are the reasons for this bull market, David? And is this massive long-term rise of gold's value beneficiary for the American people?
Well, 20 years ago, gold was roughly $450 an ounce. Today, it's over $4,000 an ounce. So yeah, that is a pretty huge meteoric rise in the price of gold. Now, some of the reasons for that, one, we've got, bank bailouts. We've got continual economic crises. We've got trillions in record debt. I mean, we're running deficits like crazy. We're printing money like there's no tomorrow. And so, all of these things add up, including the devaluing of the dollar, to make gold really rise the way it has. And over 20 years, I mean, look, we had 500 plus banks fail during the 2008 debacle. And then while President Obama was in office, he overwatched all of those bank failures. Not that his policies had a direct impact, but, there are some laws that came out from that debacle that he is responsible for. But yeah, that is a huge rise over 20 years. I mean, that's a near 800% rise. There aren't too many investments that have done anything like that.
And when you compare it to the breakdown of annualized returns on other commodities, how does it compare to the investments over that same period of time?
So that works out to roughly about 11% return year after year after year on gold. I mean, who can say that they've had investments do that? Now, over the same time period, depending on the amount of dividends that you've got, the S&P has gone roughly 250 to 180% over the same period of time. So that's a pretty good rise. But a 700% or 800% rise is much better, especially for your retirement accounts, when it comes to, putting money into assets and then trying to grow those assets so that your own asset base continues to grow. So, over those 20 years, the stock market, look what the stock market has done. We've hit like more than a dozen new highs just in the last 12 months alone. So the stock market is, way up there. S&P is getting close. The NASDAQ has done extremely well over the same period of time. I don't know what that percentage is, but it's done pretty well. But nothing has matched gold or precious metals as a whole as an investment or as a retirement portfolio asset. Gold has just skyrocketed.
Now, I think it's fair to ask as well, because of this, what does that mean ultimately for the dollar in the same amount of time? We know we're dealing with a weak dollar right now, but what would you rather put your commodities in as you're using diversification to stay afloat? Can we really rely on paper money and the dollar to stand the test of time?
Well, if you look at history, fiat currencies generally have a lifespan of 80 to 100 years. We are the only nation whose currency is beginning to outlast that particular trend. And that trend is not looking good right now for the United States. Over those last 20 years, the dollar has lost 40% of its value. So let me put it in a simple term. You've got $100,000 in your savings and you're retired. And over that 20-year period, you're living off of those funds. Well, if your $100,000 has lost 40% of its value, that means now you've got $60,000 to live on, because that dollar doesn't stretch as far and it can't purchase as much as it used to purchase. So yeah, over the last 20 years, it's not been a good picture for the dollar. On top of that, we've got BRICS, We've got 100 plus nations that want to de-dollarize their nations from us. So we've got the whole de-dollarization. We've got BRICS. We've got record debt. I mean, look, we're getting close to $38 trillion of debt. We're adding $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. So the dollar is really, it's losing value rapidly. And, if we look at all of the currencies over just the last 250 years, there are no other currencies in circulation. They generally die out within 80 to 100 years. We're getting to that 100-year mark, and look at what the debt is doing to our dollar. So the dollar, that paper asset, that's not an asset worth holding on to. It's better to take that paper asset and put it in something that doesn't lose value the way the dollar is doing. So that's kind of how the dollar has shaped up just over the last 20 years. It's lost 40% of its value.
And all of that inflation, simply a hidden tax for the American people.
Yep.
So thank you for making that comparison, David, because I think it really helps people visualize just how bad it can be, because it can be confusing at times. You have your taxes on an annual basis, sometimes every 6 months. And then you look at that, and all of a sudden, why isn't it going further than it once was?
Right.
Well, that's a great answer for it there. So a lot of Americans are naturally worried about their nest egg. How should gold and silver play that role of protecting what they've worked so hard to achieve over the course of countless years?
Well, let me respond to what you said about inflation. Governments love inflation. Why? Because it's easier to pay down their debt when the dollar's inflated. But inflation is not good for you and me. It's not good for our purchasing power. It's not good for our savings. It's not good to retire when there's high inflation, because maybe our dollar used to go this far, but now it only goes this far. And so precious metals as a whole, especially gold and silver, what they do is, let me use this example. Back in the 1920s, you could go to the Federal Reserve, or you could go to the bank, and you could buy a $20 gold piece for $20, right? You give them a $20 Federal Reserve note, and you'd get a $20 gold piece in place of that $20 bill. Well, that $20 gold piece back then could buy one of the highest quality suits that you could find in the American market. And so you take that same $20 gold piece 100 years later, and that $20 gold piece can still purchase the same high quality suit that you could purchase 100 years ago. Why is that? Well, the dollar doesn't have the same value anymore, but gold retains its value. So if you have, let's say, $1,000 today, and you buy $1,000 worth of gold today, and we go into the future, and now that $1,000 is worth, let's say, well, let's use the 20-year example. It lost 40% of its value. Well, now you've got $600. Well, that's still that $1,000 worth of gold. It's still worth $1,000. It hasn't lost that 40% of value. So now you take your gold. If you're a retiree, you might take just a small chunk of your precious metals and you trade them in for current dollars, right? So you're going to get a whole lot more dollars. And so that same amount of dollars will still purchase the same amount today as that $1,000 would have done, just a few years ago. So metals don't lose their value. They keep growing in value. But the reason why it grows in value is because the dollar is becoming valueless. It's losing value. It's losing purchasing power. It doesn't go as far. So if you are a retiree, or you're a soon-to-be retiree, I would say that it would behoove you to take at least 30% of what you have and put it into gold or silver. Right now, silver is on fire. Silver at the beginning of the year was roughly $26, $27. Since January 1st of 2025, it has gone from there. It hit, I think, a high of $51. It's pulled back a little bit. It's $49 today. But that's a meteoric rise in silver just in 8 months or 9 months of time. And so if you put these metals in your retirement account, what you're doing is you're preserving your purchasing power for the future. Because as that gold keeps going up and the silver keeps going up, when you eventually, turn it in to get some dollars to live on, well, you still have that same purchasing power. If you bought $1,000 worth of gold 10 years ago, today that $1,000 worth of gold is worth $5,000. So you still have the ability to buy the same things to pay for your bills, pay for your mortgage, pay for, whatever your living expenses are. So it's a huge hedge for today for retirees and soon to be retirees. So I would say look at precious metals, put them in your portfolio, and spare yourself the headache and the nerves when, for the guy who's only in paper and he's retired and he's like, what am I going to do? And you've got all this metal in your portfolio and you're like, life is good. So that's what I would say to retirees, diversify, protect yourself and build yourself a hedge. So in the future, you don't lose that purchasing power.
Well, it makes a lot of sense as well, David, and people can find this complimentary presidential gold guide at rsbn4thegold.com. And can you walk us through as well? Because I think some, whether it's on the younger end of things, let's say I'm in the millennial generation or those who are retired now looking into this diversification, they might be nervous about the IRA fees attached with that. But it's my understanding monetary gold can help to eliminate those permanently so you can get your start with diversification.
Absolutely. So we do have a free guide. The guide basically kind of gives you an overview of what's going on in the world today. It talks about why all of the central banks, not the central bank just here in the United States, but globally, why they're buying gold, why they're hoarding gold. One of the big things right now that we just learned in the last couple of weeks that all of these central banks are divesting themselves of U.S. Treasury bills, right? And so now they're heavy gold and they're light U.S. Treasury bills. Well, that used to be the bedrock of our credit system. And so adding that gold, I lost my train of thought, sorry. When you have that, the overview of the guide basically tells you what's going on in the world, why these things are happening, why gold is going up, why the dollar is losing value, and then it kind of shows you the simple steps for how you can get gold into your portfolio. And as far as the IRA fees go, so this is for RSBN viewers. Those IRA fees can really eat into your savings. And so what we're doing is you can pick up the phone and call. Tell us what your concerns are. Tell us what's scaring you about the market right now. And so what we'll do is if you open up an account with us, there are certain criteria that you have to meet, but we will cover all of the IRA fees for the life of your account. And, depending on the size of your account, those IRA fees can be pretty stiff. I've seen some people paying as much as $1,250 a year in annual costs just for someone to make decisions about their account. We will cover all of those for RSBN viewers for the life of their account. So all that money can now be taken and turned back into, an investment in something, or you can purchase more gold. If it's a self-directed IRA, the IRS will let you buy real estate, will let you buy art, it'll let you buy precious metals, anything that's IRS approved. And the only thing that we deal with are IRS approved metals. So there are a lot of metals out there that you can purchase, but if it's not IRS approved, we don't sell it. We don't include it. But that's kind of an overview of what the guide has, and that's an overview of what we'll do for RSBN viewers if they would like to have their fees covered.
And that's right there at rsbn4thegold.com.